Paris, France, a city of firelight and fury. Centuries of ambition carved into narrow streets and grand boulevards. Kings build it, revolutionaries tear it apart. Artists, lovers, and visionaries remake it again and again. And through it all, fiercely proud Parisians, stubborn, passionate, impossible to silence, push history forward with every protest, every masterpiece, every whispered idea that changes the world. Using advanced AI to breathe motion into forgotten engravings and long silent photographs, we won't just tell this story, you'll see it unfold. From the ancient banks of the Seine to the glittering skyline of today, this is the entire history of Paris. Let's begin at the beginning. Before Paris was Paris, it was just a collection of huts on an island. Around 259 BC, a Celtic tribe called the Parisii settles on what's now called the Île de la Cité, that small island in the middle of the Seine River. They're fishermen, traders, and river people who control a strategic crossing point. The name Parisii possibly means boat people or craftsmen, which tells you everything about how they live. They aren't building monuments or writing philosophy, they're trying to survive. Then, in 52 BC, Julius Caesar shows up. The Romans don't ask permission. They conquer the Parisii during Caesar's Gallic Wars, and the settlement is burned to the ground during the resistance. But Rome rebuilds it, bigger, better, with their trademark efficiency. They call it Lutetia, meaning marshy place or mid-water dwelling, not exactly glamorous. Roman Lutetia grows on the left bank of the Seine, and for about 3 centuries, it's a proper Roman town. They build an amphitheatre that can hold 15,000 people, bathhouses, temples, and the foundations of what will later become the Latin Quarter. The roads are straight, the aqueducts work, and if you're a Roman citizen, life is actually pretty comfortable. But empires don't last forever. By the 3rd century, Germanic tribes are raiding from the north, and Lutetia's residents retreat back to the safety of the Île de la Cité. They build walls, they fortify. The Roman dream is crumbling, and Lutetia is becoming something else, something that needs a new name. That name is about to arrive with a woman who becomes the city's patron saint, just as everything is about to fall apart. The 5th century is chaos. The Roman Empire is collapsing, and barbarian tribes are carving up Europe like a feast. In 451 AD, Attila the Hun and his army are marching toward Lutetia, and the residents are ready to abandon the city entirely. Then, a young woman named Geneviève changes everything. According to legend, Geneviève convinces the terrified population to stay and pray instead of flee. Miraculously, or coincidentally, Attila's forces change course and spare the city. Geneviève becomes Saint Geneviève, the protector of Paris. Whether you believe in miracles or military strategy, one thing is certain. Paris survives, and the legend of Geneviève gives the city something it desperately needs: hope. By 508 AD, Clovis I, king of the Franks, makes Paris his capital. This is when the city truly becomes Paris, taking its name from the Parisii tribe that lived there 1,000 years before. Clovis converts to Christianity, and Paris becomes the spiritual and political center of a new kingdom. Churches start rising. The city is no longer just a Roman outpost. It's becoming something distinctly French. But then come the Vikings. Starting in 845 AD, Norse raiders sail up the Seine and attack Paris repeatedly. They don't want to settle, they want gold, and Paris has it. The city pays them off with £7,000 of silver to leave, more extortion than a victory. The The worst siege comes in 885 AD, when the Vikings blockade Paris for months. Only a few hundred defenders hold the fortified bridges against thousands of Norsemen. They hold on, barely, until reinforcements arrive. Paris survives again, but it learns a hard lesson. If you want to keep existing, you better build stronger walls. By the year 1000, Paris is still small, still centered on that island, but it's growing. Markets are expanding onto both banks of the Seine. The city is becoming a crossroads, a place where power, religion, and commerce are starting to converge. And soon, Paris begins building the monuments that define it for centuries to come. The 12th and 13th centuries are when Paris becomes undeniably important. In 1163, construction begins on Notre-Dame Cathedral. It takes nearly 200 years to complete, and it's audacious, a building so ambitious it seems to defy gravity. Gothic architecture is the cutting edge of medieval engineering, and Notre Dame is its masterpiece. Those flying buttresses, the rose windows, the sheer vertical reach toward heaven. It's a statement. Paris is announcing itself to the world. Around the same time, the University of Paris is taking shape. By the early 1200s, scholars from across Europe are flocking to the left bank to study theology, philosophy, and law. This is one of the first universities in Europe, and it makes Paris an intellectual capital. The Latin Quarter gets its name because students and professors speak Latin. This is where medieval Europe is learning how to think. King Philip II, who rules from 1180 to 1223, transforms Paris from a medieval town into a real city. He paves the streets, literally, they've been mud before, and builds the Louvre. But not the museum you know today. Philip's Louvre is a fortress, a castle designed to protect the city from invasion. Thick walls, a moat, a tower to store the royal treasury. Paris is saying, we're not getting sacked again. The city's population explodes. By 1300, Paris has around 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. Markets thrive, guilds control the trades. The city expands beyond the Ile de la Cité onto both banks, and bridges multiply. But wealth attracts envy, and Paris is about to learn that being important means becoming a target. The 14th century nearly destroys Paris. First comes famine. Harvests fail across Europe in the 1310s, and people starve. Next, the 100 Years' War, starting in 1337, when England and France begin a brutal, generational conflict over who should rule France. Paris is at the center of it. But nothing compares to what comes in 1348. The Black Death arrives in Paris, one of the deadliest plague outbreaks in history. Estimates suggest that between a third and half of the city's population dies. Bodies pile up faster than they can be buried. The smell of death hangs over the city for years. Trade collapses. Entire neighborhoods are abandoned. If you live through the plague in Paris, you watch your world end. In 1358, a popular uprising called the Jacquerie sees peasants revolt against the nobility. Paris is in chaos, with different factions fighting for control. Later in 1382, the Maillotins revolt sees Parisian workers rebel against heavy taxes. The city is angry, hungry, and increasingly violent. Then, in 1420, during the 100 Years' War, Paris falls to the English and their Burgundian allies. For 16 years, the English occupy the city. Parisians are living under foreign rule, and the French crown flees to the Loire Valley. But then, a teenage peasant girl from Lorraine changes everything. Jeanne d'Arc, also known as Joan of Arc, arrives on the scene in 1429, claiming God has sent her to save France. She's 17 years old, illiterate, and convinced she hears the voices of saints. Somehow, she persuades the Dauphin, the uncrowned heir to the French throne, to give her an army. She leads French forces to lift the siege of Orléans, a turning point in the war. Her presence electrifies the French troops and terrifies the English, who think she's a witch. Joan doesn't liberate Paris directly. An attempt in 1429 fails, and she's wounded. But her campaign shifts the momentum of the entire war. The Dauphin is crowned King Charles VII at Reims, and suddenly France has hope again. Joan is captured by the Burgundians in 1430, sold to the English, and burned at the stake for heresy in Rouen in 1431. She's 19 years old, but her impact echoes. Paris is finally liberated in 1436. The war doesn't officially end until 1453, but Paris has already been scarred by over a century of violence, disease, and occupation. By 1500, Paris is recovering, but slowly. The population is rebuilding. The monarchy is reasserting control. The city is exhausted, but it's still standing. And the Renaissance is about to arrive, bringing with it a new kind of transformation. The 16th century brings both beauty and bloodshed to Paris. King Francis I, who rules from 1515 to 1547, brings Renaissance culture from Italy to France. He rebuilds parts of the Louvre, transforming it from a medieval fortress into a Renaissance palace. He invites Leonardo da Vinci to France, who spends his final years there. Art, architecture, and humanism are flourishing. Paris is becoming elegant. But there's a problem. By the 1560s, France is divided between Catholics and Protestant Huguenots, and Paris is fiercely Catholic. Tensions explode on August 24, 1572, during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. What starts as an assassination of Huguenot leaders turns into a city-wide slaughter. Catholic mobs hunt down Protestants in the streets. Thousands are killed in Paris over several days, with bodies thrown into the Seine. The violence spreads across France, and estimates suggest 70,000 people die nationwide. It's one of the darkest chapters in the city's history. The wars of religion continue for decades, and Paris remains a Catholic stronghold. In 1589, King Henry III is assassinated in Paris, and Henry IV, a Protestant who converts to Catholicism to secure the throne, supposedly says, "Paris is well worth a mass." He enters Paris in 1594, ending the siege of the city and beginning a slow process of healing. Henry IV tries to rebuild Paris's reputation. He commissions the Pont Neuf, the oldest surviving bridge in Paris, completed in 1607. He lays out the Place des Vosges, one of the first planned squares in the city. Paris is recovering, but religious scars run deep. As the 16th century closes, Paris is exhausted from war, but ready to transform once again, this time into the absolute center of European power. The 17th century is when Paris becomes the capital of European grandeur. Louis XIII and his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, centralize power in Paris. Richelieu founds the Académie Française in 1635 to protect and regulate the French language. It's about control, linguistic, cultural, political. Paris is being shaped into the symbol of French authority. But the real transformation comes with Louis XIV, the Sun King, who rules from 1643 to 1715. Louis makes monarchy an art form. He expands the Louvre, builds the Hôtel des Invalides for war veterans in 1670, and commissions grand boulevards. Paris is being redesigned to reflect absolute power. However, Louis XIV makes a controversial choice. In 1682, he moves the royal court from Paris to Versailles. He doesn't trust Paris. The city has a history of rebellion, and Louis wants distance from the mob. Versailles becomes the political center of France, while Paris remains the economic and cultural one. Even without the king physically present, Paris thrives. Salons, gatherings of intellectuals, writers, and philosophers, become the heartbeat of cultural life. French cuisine is being refined into an art. Fashion, manners, and etiquette developed in Parisian society are copied across Europe. This is when France, and specifically Paris, becomes synonymous with culture and sophistication. The century ends with Paris as the most influential city in Europe. But the relationship between the monarchy and the people of Paris is deteriorating, and that tension will have catastrophic consequences. The 18th century begins with elegance and ends with blood. This is the age of Enlightenment, and Paris is its capital. Philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot meet in cafes and salons, questioning authority, debating reason, and imagining new forms of government. The Encyclopédie, published in Paris, tries to compile all human knowledge and challenges the Church's monopoly on truth. Ideas are dangerous, and Paris is full of them. But below the salons, Paris is rotting. The city's population swells to over 600,000, making it one of the largest in Europe. The poor live in filthy, overcrowded neighborhoods. Sanitation is medieval, disease is rampant. Meanwhile, the aristocracy lives in luxury, seemingly oblivious to the suffering around them. The situation gets so bad that by the 1780s, Paris's overflowing cemeteries are literally making people sick. Bodies are buried so shallow that the smell of decay drifts through neighborhoods. The solution? The city starts moving millions of skeletal remains into the old limestone quarry tunnels beneath Paris. These become the catacombs, miles of underground passages lined with the bones of 6 million Parisians, stacked in walls of skulls and femurs. You can still visit small sections of them today, walking through tunnels surrounded by the remains of centuries of Parisians. By the 1780s, France is bankrupt from wars and the lavish spending of Louis XV and Louis XVI. Taxes crush the poor, while the nobility pays almost nothing. Bread prices soar. People are starving in the streets of Paris. And the general public of Paris have finally had enough. On July 14th, 1789, Parisians storm the Bastille, a royal fortress and symbol of tyranny. It isn't a strategic target. Only 7 prisoners are inside. But symbolism matters. The French Revolution begins, and Paris is its stage. What follows is a decade of chaos. The royal family is brought from Versailles to Paris and held in the Tuileries Palace. In 1792, the monarchy is abolished. In January 1793, King Louis XVI is executed by guillotine in what's now the Place de la Concorde. Thousands watch. 9 months later, Queen Marie Antoinette follows. The revolution devours its own children. The Reign of Terror, led by Robespierre, sees tens of thousands guillotined. Nobles, priests, revolutionaries who aren't radical enough. Paris's streets run with blood, literally. Bodies pile up. By 1794, Robespierre himself is guillotined, and the terror ends. France is exhausted, traumatized, and searching for stability. That stability comes in the form of a Corsican general who is about to make Paris the center of an empire. Napoleon Bonaparte seizes power in 1799, and Paris becomes the capital of an empire. Napoleon is a dictator, but he's also a builder. He understands that greatness requires monuments. He commissions the Arc de Triomphe in 1806 to honor his armies, though it isn't completed until 1836. He orders the construction of the Rue de Rivoli, a grand street running through the heart of Paris. He reforms the legal system with the Napoleonic Code, which still influences law across Europe today. Napoleon also loots. As his armies conquer Europe, he brings back treasures and displays them in the Louvre, which he transforms into a public museum. The Louvre becomes a statement. Paris is the cultural capital of the world, and all roads lead here. But empires built on conquest don't last. Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 and his defeat at Leipzig in 1813 bring foreign armies to Paris's doorstep. In 1814, Paris is occupied by Russian, Prussian, and Austrian troops. Napoleon abdicates and is exiled to Elba. He comes back in 1815 for the 100 Days, but his final defeat at Waterloo ends the dream. Napoleon is exiled again, this time to St. Helena, where he dies in 1821. Paris is left to reckon with what Napoleon builds and what he destroys. The city has been the heart of an empire that reshapes Europe, but now it's occupied, humbled, and facing an uncertain future. After Napoleon, the Bourbon monarchy is restored, but the people of Paris haven't forgotten the revolution. In July 1830, Parisians rise up again, overthrowing King Charles X in the July Revolution. Barricades go up in the streets, a tactic that defines Parisian resistance for generations. A new citizen king, Louis Philippe, takes the throne, but he satisfies no one. In February 1848, revolution erupts again. Louis Philippe flees, and the Second Republic is declared. But within months, workers in Paris rise up once more in the June Days Uprising, demanding social reforms. The army brutally suppresses them, killing thousands. Paris is a city at war with itself. Out of this chaos comes Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleon's nephew, who is elected president in 1848. In 1851, he stages a coup and declares himself Emperor Napoleon III. Despite his authoritarian rule, he transforms Paris in ways that still define the city today. Napoleon III hires Baron Haussmann to redesign Paris. Haussmann's renovations, carried out from 1853 to 1870, are radical. He demolishes medieval neighborhoods, replacing narrow, winding streets with wide boulevards. He builds parks, sewers, and uniform apartment buildings with those iconic Parisian facades. Why? Partly for modernization, but also for control. Wide boulevards are harder to barricade and easier for troops to move through. Beauty and authoritarianism go hand in hand. Haussmann's Paris is the Paris we recognize today. The boulevards, the streetlights, the elegant uniformity. But that beauty comes at a cost. Working-class neighborhoods are destroyed and thousands are displaced. Then, in 1870, Napoleon III makes a fatal mistake. He goes to war with Prussia. The Franco-Prussian War is a disaster. The French are crushed, Napoleon III is captured, and by September 1870, Prussian forces are besieging Paris. The city holds out for 4 months. People eat rats, cats, and even zoo animals to survive. In January 1871, Paris surrenders, but the humiliation has only just begun. In March 1871, after the siege, Parisians refused to accept defeat quietly. Radical workers, revolutionaries, and citizens established the Paris Commune, a short-lived revolutionary government that lasts just 2 months. The communards want social reforms, workers' rights, and direct democracy. They're idealistic, disorganized, and doomed. The French government, based in Versailles, sends in troops. What follows is the Bloody Week in May 1871, one of the most brutal urban battles in history. Government forces kill between 10,000 and 20,000 communards. Prisoners are executed en masse. The communards, in their final days, burn public buildings, including parts of the Tuileries Palace, and set fire to the Hôtel de Ville. Paris is traumatized once again. But from the ashes comes renewal. The Belle Époque, the beautiful era, lasts from the 1870s to 1914, and it's Paris's golden age of culture. The city becomes the world capital of art, literature, and innovation. The Impressionists, Monet, Renoir, Degas, are painting light itself. The Moulin Rouge opens in 1889, and Parisian cabaret becomes legendary. Writers like Émile Zola and Victor Hugo define the age. In 1889, the Eiffel Tower is built for the World's Fair. Parisians hate it at first, call it an eyesore, a metal monstrosity, but it becomes the symbol of Paris, of modernity, of human ambition reaching toward the sky. The Paris Metro opens in 1900 with its distinctive Art Nouveau entrances designed by Hector Guimard. The Grand Palais and Petit Palais are built. Paris is thriving, cosmopolitan, electric. But beneath the glamour, tensions are rising across Europe. Alliances are forming, militaries are arming. And in 1914, the lights go out across the continent. World War I nearly breaks Paris. Though the front lines are north and east of the city, Paris lives under constant threat. In 1914, German forces come within 30 miles of the city during the First Battle of the Marne. Parisians can hear the artillery. Taxis are famously commandeered to rush French troops to the front, the taxis of the Marne. And it works. Paris is saved, barely. For 4 years, Paris endures. Air raids, rationing, the constant stream of wounded soldiers. The war ends in 1918, and the Treaty of Versailles is signed just outside the city in 1919. France wins, but at a horrific cost. Over 1 million French soldiers are dead. The 1920s bring the Année Folle, the crazy years. Paris becomes the cultural capital of the world once again. American jazz floods the nightclubs. Writers and artists, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein, Pablo Picasso, make Paris their home. The lost generation finds refuge here. Coco Chanel revolutionizes fashion from her boutique on Rue Cambon, liberating women from corsets and introducing the little black dress, costume jewelry, and Chanel No. 5 perfume. She's making Paris synonymous with modern elegance and style. Paris is alive, electric, and modern. It's the place to be if you're young, ambitious, or running from something. But the party can't last. By the 1930s, economic depression grips Europe. Fascism is rising in Germany, Italy, and Spain. In Paris, political tensions intensify. The far-right riots in 1934. Refugees fleeing persecution begin arriving in the city. In 1939, war returns, and this time, Paris won't be spared. World War II brings darkness to Paris. When Germany invades France in May 1940, the French military collapses within weeks. On the 14th of June 1940, German troops march into Paris. The city is declared an open city to avoid destruction, meaning it surrenders without a fight. The French government flees. The swastika flies over the Eiffel Tower. For 4 years, Paris lives under Nazi occupation. Cafes, theatres and nightclubs stay open, but they serve German officers. Jewish Parisians are rounded up. Over 13,000 are arrested in the Veldiv roundup in July 1942 and sent to concentration camps. Most never return. But resistance exists. The French resistance carries out sabotage, publishes underground newspapers, and smuggles Allied pilots. Parisians resist in small, dangerous ways, distributing leaflets, hiding Jews, risking everything. In August 1944, as Allied forces close in, Parisians rise up. The Paris uprising begins on the 19th of August. Barricades go up across the city again. The resistance fights street by street against German forces. Hitler orders the city burned, but the German commander, Dietrich von Holtitz, disobeys. On the 25th of August, 1944, French and American forces enter Paris. General Charles de Gaulle walks down the Champs-Élysées in triumph. Paris is free. But liberation comes with a cost. Collaborators are punished, sometimes violently. Women who have relationships with Germans have their heads shaved in public. The city is scarred, angry, and trying to figure out who it wants to be after such betrayal. Recovery takes decades. After the war, Paris has to rebuild, not just physically, but spiritually. The city becomes a center of existentialism. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir hold court in cafes, grappling with questions of freedom, responsibility, and meaning after the horrors of war. Economically, France recovers with the help of the Marshall Plan. By the 1950s and 60s, Paris is modernizing. High-rise suburbs, banlieues, are built to house a growing population. The périphérique, a ring road around the city, is completed. Paris is sprawling, growing beyond its historic core. In 1947, Christian Dior launches his New Look collection from his Avenue Montaigne atelier, redefining post-war femininity with cinched waists and full skirts. The fashion houses of Paris are dressing the world's elite and defining style for an entire generation. But tensions are building. In May 1968, Paris explodes again, not in war, but in protest. Students at the Sorbonne occupy their campus, demanding educational reform and opposing authoritarianism. Workers join in, launching general strikes. Paris is paralyzed. Barricades go up in the Latin Quarter. Riot police clash with protesters. Millions across France go on strike. The May 68 protests don't topple the government, but they change France. They challenge traditional authority, spark debates about gender, sexuality, and workers' rights, and leave a lasting cultural mark. The 1970s bring further change. President Georges Pompidou commissions the Pompidou Center, a radical, inside-out building that opens in 1977 and shocks traditionalists. Paris is embracing modern architecture, sometimes controversially. But the story of Paris isn't over yet. As it steps into the modern world, new challenges will be faced. The last 40 years see Paris continue to evolve. In 1981, François Mitterrand becomes president and launches his Grand Projet, massive architectural projects to mark his legacy. The Louvre Pyramid, designed by I.M. Pei and completed in 1989, is controversial but becomes iconic. The Opera Bastille opens in 1989. The Grande Arche de la Défense, a modern echo of the Arc de Triomphe, is completed the same year. Paris is asserting its place in the modern world. But modernity brings challenges. The banlieues, once symbols of progress, become associated with poverty, unemployment, and tension. Riots erupt in 2005, sparked by the deaths of 2 teenagers fleeing police. Cars burn. The divide between central Paris and its suburbs becomes impossible to ignore. Terrorism strikes Paris hard in the 21st century. In January 2015, gunmen attack the Charlie Hebdo offices, killing 12. Later that year in November, coordinated attacks across the city kill 130 people. Paris mourns, but it refuses to be broken. In April 2019, Notre-Dame Cathedral catches fire. The world watches as the spire collapses. It's devastating. Paris hosts the Summer Olympics in 2024, showcasing the city on a global stage once more. Today, Paris is a city of contrasts. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a global tourism magnet, and a political capital. It's also a city asking what comes next, how to honor its past while facing an uncertain future. But if there's one thing Paris's history teaches us, it's that the city endures. It's been conquered, burned, occupied, and torn apart by its own people. But it always rebuilds. It always survives. So there it is, 2,000 years of Paris, from a Celtic fishing village to the City of Light. We've seen it rise from the ashes of the Roman Empire, survive Viking raids, medieval plagues, and the bloodiest revolution in European history. Paris isn't perfect. Its history is scarred by violence, oppression, and profound darkness. But this city gave the world revolutionary ideas about freedom and human dignity, the belief that people have the right to shape their own future. For better and worse, Paris has never stopped fighting for that. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into our world's most fascinating cities. There's so much more to explore, and as always, we'll see you in the past.